The company is run by backpackers. Every single one of us here gets out on the trail, uses the gear, and we know what it's for.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Derek Rasmussen, the marketing director over at Outdoor Vitals. Derek, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, man. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're psyched to have you on today. Let's start out with an overview. What is Outdoor Vitals?
Yeah, so Outdoor Vitals, we are an ultralight backpacking gear company. We design and sell ultralight backpacking gear worldwide. We're designing it all here in our headquarters in Southern Utah and shipping it worldwide. So it's a lot of fun. I get a lot of time in the seat, in the office, but I also get plenty of time hiking the trails, testing gear, creating ads, whatever it is. And so, yeah, it's just a lot of fun.
Man, tough life having to test out the products like that on a daily basis.
You're telling me.
Well, cool, man. One of the things that's really cool about today is you've been with the company, I'm going to round and say more or less since day one. I know that first, call it 2-3 years, you hadn't joined yet, but you've gotten to see the company really evolve in this pretty crazy manner. So let's start out with that. My understanding is early stages, more or less all your sales were coming from Amazon. Nowadays, Amazon's still a healthy part of the business, but my perception is it's a way smaller part than it used to be.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that transition come about? How did you shift from 100% reliance on Amazon to very small part of the business while still growing the business so significant?
Well, I mean, if you look at the story of Outdoor Vitals and how it started, how our founder, Tayson Whitaker, founded the company about 11 years ago, it kind of makes sense. When he was just out of college, he had $500 in his pocket, right? $500 to do something with, and that's how we started the company. You can't do a lot with $500. You especially can't afford to have your own design department. You can't afford to even work with manufacturing companies because they all have minimums. So you're really limited, and especially if you're not a sewer, which he is not. He's not a sewer. You can't just sew up a piece of gear or a sleeping bag or whatever and go with it. So what he did is he learned a lot about the sourcing world and manufacturing and fabric supplying partners. And he got into communication with a few of them, and one of them allowed him to just start buying samples. So a lot of times these manufacturing companies, they have top line samples, sleeping bags or whatever, like this specific factory was making sleeping bags, and he bought just samples. So he wasn't even ordering anything from production lines or anything like that. And he bought the samples and started creating listings on Amazon, which he'd also taught himself about, and started selling that way. So it wasn't any sort of our own design in day one. It was just samples, right? Turns out a lot of people wanted to buy those sleeping bags on Amazon. Back then, 11 years ago, there weren't a ton of sleeping bag options on Amazon. There's a lot more lower ticket items. There's some expensive stuff still, but it's not like it is today, right? Where you can find most anything on Amazon. And so sleeping bags, he was offering these samples at a pretty competitive price and just selling them out of his little apartment where he was living. And every time he sold out, he'd order more samples. He'd buy more samples. He'd just kind of turn the money around to just buy and sell more samples. Over the first year or so, as that kind of progressed, he started asking these manufacturing some suppliers if they could just slap a logo on there for him real fast before they shipped it to him. And they obliged. And it was a really terrible logo. We might have to see if we can pull that out of the archives. It looked kind of like an alien. But anyways, that's kind of where it started. And then if you fast forward to today, we're a full company with multiple departments, including a well-established design department where we have people who all they do all day long is design gear. These are our own designs. We're not just buying samples or doing the drop shipping thing. This is 100% our designs that we take ownership of. The company is run by backpackers. Every single one of us here gets out on the trail, uses the gear, and we know what it's for, right? And so that's what we're doing today. Amazon doesn't quite work the same for us now as it used to. Over time, more and more people started to sell sleeping bags. In fact, this is kind of a tangent, I guess, but there was a specific company that ripped off the sleeping bags we were already selling. They copied them almost to the T and put just a little different logo on them and just slightly undercut the Amazon prices. And that was a whole fiasco.
Ooh.
But as that happens more and more, and just more people are getting on Amazon to sell, it's just become less and less effective in terms of growth and in terms of revenue. And it's just not as profitable. So we do still sell a few things on Amazon, but it's a very, very minor part of our business today. And we don't sell our main products on Amazon. Our main flagship items, our favorite top designs, top sellers, those typically don't go to Amazon. We kind of view Amazon now as more of kind of an easygoing lead gen tool, where it's like, okay, here's some low ticket items that still make sense to have on Amazon. If people buy them, that's going to be their first touch point with Outdoor Vitals. And from there, if they want anything else, they can come and shop our site, because we're not putting like our really nice jackets or sleeping bags or backpacks on Amazon. We've kind of had this whole transition as we've grown as a company, as we've started truly developing our own designs, which we really got into that in year 2 or 3. After Jason founded it, he started actually designing things and working with his team to design things. But for the first 1 or 2 years, it was mostly just shipping those samples.
That's wild. Well, in building upon what you were saying, and that this has been my experience, like as a consumer, it seems like there are so many, we'll call them like knockoff variants of big brands that you can get on Amazon at really affordable prices, and tends to not always be the highest quality that's on there. But then not only that, but you also have like Amazon coming out with Amazon Basics for a lot of different product variants. And I would imagine probably taking away market share from a lot of people. So I've seen a lot of e-com brands that start out super reliant on Amazon, and then sales start getting cannibalized by all these different forces, and you kind of get shafted by that. So I'm really curious, how did you and the team ultimately transition away from Amazon in the early stages? Did it start out with like 1 or 2 marketing channels that you started pouring a little bit more resources into, and it just took off from there? Sounds like there was at some point a really big strategic decision to say, hey, 8 out of 10 products we're not going to list on Amazon. Maybe it's just these lower ticket items that we're going to feature.
Yeah. So some of that came naturally. We've always worked at upgrading our designs. And in the first few years, we had a lot of our stuff on Amazon, even our own designs that we had developed our own sleeping bags at that point, and we were selling them on Amazon still. And they were doing well for a time. But as we've developed better and better gear, got better and better at our designing, sometimes naturally we've just been able to phase out what we've been doing on Amazon. We just sell out of the old models or the old products, maybe that we've discontinued. We let them sell out on Amazon, and that's that. So it's kind of, in some ways, been a natural transition. When we've launched this new product, it's like, wow, this is really cool. We don't really want to put it on Amazon. There's way more fees selling through Amazon than through our own website. But it's kind of been natural. And part of that is enabled because we did have our own website pretty much from the start as well. We were selling on Amazon, but we also had like a Shopify site. And Amazon in the start, it's drove a lot of our purchases. There's just, the Amazon platform helped us out in that way. But as we were able to scale our native website sales, those things kind of like, if you picture a scale, they kind of offset one another. It became less necessary for us to utilize Amazon with those kind of inflated fees compared to Shopify, at least. And we were able to be more profitable through our own website sales. And it's not saying like we didn't keep using Amazon. It was just kind of, hey, this is less profitable. Let's put less resources towards it. Instead, let's focus on what's going to bring in more benefit to the company.
Definitely. And within that, and I won't ask you to give away too much of the secret sauce about like what marketing channels generate what percentage of revenue, but what are some of the big marketing channels for you guys today? I would imagine Meta ads is on that list, probably Google Shopping as well, but talk to us a little about some of those platforms.
Yeah, for sure. Meta and Google are major platforms for us in terms of advertising. We've dabbled in a lot of other platforms as well, but none of them have been quite as profitable as Meta and Google so far. Google especially is just huge. I mean, if you think about it, everybody goes on Google. And these days there's more and more people using AI for searches rather than Google search, but there's still a lot of relevancy there to just have everything optimized to show up on Google and have really good search ads, really good video ads, everything you can there. And then Meta is really great, especially for retargeting. Once you have an initial interaction, Meta can target those people really, really well.
Definitely. And I'll timestamp this one that we're recording June of 2025. This data point I'm sure is going to change over time, but to your point about Google's prominence versus AI tools, right now AI tools have a really small percentage of that search market share space, but also ChatGPT in particular, there is a massive overlap between the businesses that ChatGPT is citing most often and the businesses showing up at the top of Google, or more importantly, the Bing search engine. So there's a lot of stuff you can do to optimize around, call it all sorts of different ChatGPT and other LLM tools. I'd argue if you optimize for search, optimize for Google search, you're getting 80% of the way there. And then it's a lot of things you can do beyond that. But
Right.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love
for sure.
love the way that you put that. Well, that's brilliant. One of the things I really wanted to get into today, you guys have a sophisticated marketing team at this point. There's a lot of different channels you're working on. I want to talk a little about attribution, because in my opinion, that is getting more and more challenging to, I guess I would say, credit different sources and determine success from each source as time goes on. One we had, I think it was like 2012, Google started encrypting, I think it was 99% of all keyword data that used to be publicly accessible in Google Analytics. Two, you have all sorts of like unassigned and not set traffic that'll show up in Google Analytics 4, the current version of Google Analytics. So maybe starting out, how do you go about auditing success with these various marketing channels that you're working with?
Yeah. So, you're about to hear me nerd out here. I love attribution. So, well, it starts with what your objective is, right? If your objective is growth, for example, you're going to measure things differently than if your objective is profit, right? Those two things aren't the same in terms of how you go about your data. Obviously, both are great things, but they're kind of on different ends of a teeter-totter, if you will, or a seesaw. So what we do is, in a general sense, we really look at ROAS, return on ad spend, or ROI for any given platform. But before you can really say, hey, if we're hitting this target here, then, we're doing good, you've really got to understand your data. So funnily enough, I think that one of the best things you can do as a marketer or as a marketing team is to actually hire a finance guy, not to necessarily be on the marketing team, but just to really make sure that you understand 100% your finances, everything about your company, all the data points, someone that can really crunch numbers. If that's not you, make sure you're paying someone to do it. Because if you don't have real data that you can trust, then, the rest of this conversation is pretty much useless. You've got to understand numbers. And if you're a creative guy, if you're just the strategy guy, you need to find someone that can really, really tell you what's up with the data and knows how to dive really deep into your company's numbers, finances, and other data. So with that as a baseline, then you can start answering a lot of questions. So, say your objective is growth, right? You don't want to be unprofitable, but you want to grow. You've got to find the balance and what targets you need to set that will allow you to maximize growth while at least maintaining break even as a business. And that doesn't just mean like, oh, well, I spent $5 on ads. Did I make $5 back? If that's how you're doing your math, you are 100% losing a lot of money because you're not factoring in the product costs. You're not factoring in overhead. You're not factoring in paying your employees, whatever. So you've got to know your business financials. So a lot of people think when they look at their ad platforms, hey, looks like I have a return on ad spend that's greater than 1. They might think that's a good thing, right? That just means they're bringing in more than what they're spending on the platform specifically. But that only works if you have no other costs. Like maybe you're an info business and you got a one-time fee to create a product a long time ago, and now you're just selling this digital product. That might work. But for most people that are selling any kind of physical goods, you're going to have to hit a ROAS much higher than 1 to be profitable or at least break even. And so that all kind of plays in. You just have to know what those costs are, and you have to know them across departments. If you're only factoring in the marketing department costs, you're still missing a ton of stuff. When it comes to attribution, I like to be as conservative as possible and then use as much hard data facts as I can. When we set our target ROAS, we do factor in our costs. And sometimes our target return on ad spend when we're advertising products is different per product because we have different product costs associated with those different products, whether it's overhead, whether it's just the cost of producing the product, the margins maybe are smaller. And so we'll have different target ROAS. I won't say like, oh, say it's Meta. If we're hitting a 4.5 or higher, then everything's good on Meta. That might not be the case if some of your products don't fit the bill for that, if that makes sense. Some products, your targets might be a 3. Some of them, hey, they might be a 2 because you don't have a lot of costs associated with that product. But you've got to know that before you can really scale your business and really know that you're going to be profitable and that you're going to be bringing the money that you need. And a lot of people, they choose to be unprofitable in that initial transaction. And that's fine. That's the strategy. Some of the reasoning behind that is to, hey, like if we sell at a loss now, then we know that the percentage of customers that buy a second time is really high. And we can kind of do the math that over a 30-day period, maybe it'll even out. But you've still got to know that. You've got to be able to say, hey, if I sell at a loss now, like maybe my ROAS, I'm accepting a lower ROAS on some of my ads right now. I've got to know that I'm going to make that up later. And some of that just comes through testing.
People ask me all the time, should I be using ChatGPT to create content for my site? So here's the thing. AI is great at quickly spitting out blog content. It's also great at pissing off your following. If you've spent years building your brand and follower base, why would you risk that all with AI-generated content? At Intergrowth, we work with companies that see their brand as an asset to get more customers through human-crafted articles that your customers look for online. We master your brand voice and work with your team to write the best articles on the internet that bring you customers on autopilot from search engines like Google. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team.
That was brilliant. I was going to say you got into so many questions that I wanted to ask and just saved me so much time of talking. That was perfect. Couple follow-ups within there. Can we walk through a sample of maybe what some of these calculations would be and some of these, not even calculations, but what are some of these metrics that maybe I should look like with just one hypothetical product? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's fine. Totally.
Awesome. Let's say that I'm selling high-end pillows. I've used this broad example for a couple of podcast episodes before. I'm a fairly new dad, so not sleeping as much as I would like to be, and pillows are front of mind. Let's say I'm selling a $50 pillow. We can get into product features if you really want to put me on the spot, but I'm selling $50 pillow. What are some of these numbers that I should be looking into, and either hiring a financial analyst who can help me to assess this, or seeing if I can hop into, let's say, QuickBooks and figure these numbers out on my own?
Yeah. So most people, I would assume, they're not like sitting there with a huge manufacturing facility in their backyard or in the back of their building. So they're probably going to have to outsource the mass production of their pillows. Maybe the company has designed the pillow themselves, kind of like we do. We design things here. We do sew some of the things ourselves. But when it comes to mass production, we don't have massive facilities that can mass produce products. And so, you've got to think about that. All right, how much is it going to cost to produce this product? And you've also got to remember that these manufacturing companies, they have minimum order quantities. So you can't just say, oh, I want to produce 5. No, there's going to be a lot that is going to be the minimum that you're going to have to pay for. And also you can kind of be strategic about this. If the more you order, typically the more price breaks you get. So if you're confident that you can sell 50,000 of them, as opposed to maybe just the minimum of, say it's 5,000, you're going to get a cheaper price per finished pillow for the 50,000. So you got to start kind of factoring in those, but you've got to know that. What's the cost per pillow to get them produced and then to get them to my warehouses? What's the shipping or freight fees so that we can fulfill them out of our warehouse? And then you've got to think about employee costs. Okay, how much time do we take in the warehouse for someone to pick an item, pack it, get it shipped? What's the shipping costs? What's the weight of the product? How much do we pay per shipping? Or are we covering shipping? Is that something the customer pays for? Once you start adding all these things up, then you can kind of find your way to, all right, what's a break-even cost of this pillow, right? And that's the really basic spot that you've got to get to. But you can go further from there as well in your calculations when you're setting these targets. And that's kind of what I mentioned earlier about, all right, what's our conversion rates? And then what's our repeat purchase rate? Even if it's not like say buying that pillow again. Maybe it's someone wants to buy a quilt. Maybe the company sells a quilt or something. It helps you sleep better. How many of these initial pillow purchasers later on go on to buy a quilt because they liked the pillow they got? How good are we at advertising that quilt as a second purchase? If you can find percentages and numbers from there, then you can start also factoring in those numbers to the targets that you're setting and really make some business decisions that can help you scale and grow and maximize that growth. So going back to that cost per pillow point, you've got to use that and then look at metrics like cost per acquisition on an advertising platform, right? What is it costing me to actually get a purchaser on this platform? And if that cost per acquisition is greater than your cost per products, you've got problems, right? And then some of that's going to go hand in hand with the return on ad spend. It's not just the return on ad spend, because maybe I'm only spending $1, but I am, getting $50 back when I sell a pillow. That's return on ad spend because I'm only spending $1 in ad spend. But what's the cost per acquisition? Maybe that pillow purchase only happens once a week and the algorithm is trying to show this ad to a lot of people and you're racking up cost per acquisition. It's like, all right, the ad platform spent like $100 just to get one sale. That's going to change your ROAS. Obviously, you're going to have a poor ROAS at that point, but it's also going to be like a really high cost per acquisition. So those are two touch points that are very similar and very related that you can always use to compare to that cost that you've figured out for your product. But yeah, that's kind of how we would operate. We would set a target ROAS, and then we would either scale or back off that ad campaign, based on whether or not we were hitting the target ROAS. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, definitely. That was phenomenal. So within that, because on the note of like return on ad spend, I'm curious how you go about calculating, let's say how you go about calculating customer acquisition costs, considering or assuming that quite a few of your sales are generated from like multiple channels. I would assume there are a lot of scenarios where, whether it's my hypothetical pillow company or whether it's Outdoor Vitals, maybe someone sees or let's say someone sees like a Google shopping ad, they decide not to make a purchase, but then they end up coming back through meta retargeting and end up making a purchase through meta retargeting. Meta retargeting is going to look like it generated this incredible ad spend. On paper, Google shopping, maybe you can get some attribution credit that comes into play there, but how do you go about looking into that side of things?
Yeah, well, what we do is we really don't trust native dashboards. So we use a tool, a first-party attribution tool. There's a few of them out there to really get a lot more confidence in our attribution. What's nice about a lot of these tools is they allow you to set different attribution models. And so if I want to be just looking at the last click as an attribution model, right? What's the last thing they click before a purchase? I want to give that thing all the credit. I can do that. You can just really toggle on and off these different attribution settings and kind of get a good picture for where the sales are coming from. There are attribution models I can see. And all right, well, let's spread out the credit that we're giving here to any channel that the customer interacted with before making the purchase. And I can look at that model. That way I'm not saying, shut off Meta. It doesn't have an impact. I can still see, okay, there was an impact for that sale. But yeah, I think that's one thing that I would recommend doing is looking into these first party attribution tools, because in my experience, you're always going to have inflated numbers and inflated metrics on native dashboards. I haven't seen one that's really super accurate. The closest one I have seen is Google. Google Ads dashboard is the closest to how we like to operate, at least. But Meta, don't take Meta's numbers for what they are in terms of ROAS, at least. You can obviously take like the costs. Meta knows what it's spending. But in terms of attributing purchases and conversions, I don't think pixel-based attribution is the way to go these days. You're really going to want to rely more on first-party attribution tools. So for us, like one example is I might see in Meta ads a reported ROAS of 8. But then if I look at our tool, our first-party attribution tool, that same campaign on a last-click attribution only shows a reported ROAS of, say, 4. It's typically that drastic of a difference where it's really half of what Meta says it is. And again, that's based on a last click attribution model. A lot of that is because Meta isn't necessarily wrong. I can match the reported metrics that I see on Meta in my first party attribution tool. by switching around the attribution model. But Meta's only giving you the one attribution model to look at. They don't give you an option to change that too much. You can change like the look back window, say, hey, do we want to count things from the last 7 days? Or do we want to count things only from the last day after they clicked the ad? You can change that, but the other aspects of the model, they don't let you change right now. And so that's why I wouldn't make all of your decisions based off of that, because different models can help influence different decisions. If you want to know what's really driving the sale, right? Not that it just had an influence or reminded someone that you exist as a business because they saw your ad, but what actually got someone to click and purchase right there. The last click attribution model is the most helpful for that. And you can scale those ads or those marketing channels with the most confidence. And that, again, that's not to say that the other channels or platforms don't have an impact and are not important, because they are, but you're going to want to scale and manage those platforms accordingly. Does that make sense? You don't want to just say, all right, let's just scale social media just as much as we are paid ads, because our customers are seeing social media posts too. So let's spend all our time doing that. Well, no, because people aren't really purchasing a lot off of social media posts. So you don't want to spend as much time, resources, et cetera, on that as you do on your ads that are bringing in the money. And the same thing applies to just various marketing channels and platforms. You want to make sure you're giving them appropriate resources, whether that's monetary, whether that's time, or just effort. So that way you can really optimize your scale and your profitability. If you're spending too much resources on a platform that really isn't bringing you in that much money at the end of the day, you're not going to be as profitable as you could be.
That was phenomenal. And within that, let's give a shout out. What first-party attribution platform are you guys using right now?
We use Triplewell, and we've been really, really happy with it. There's a lot of other ones that are made for especially huge brands that make a lot more money than we do currently. And I don't think that some of those other tools are necessary. Triplewell is probably one of the most approachable ones, but it's also very, very effective and impressive. We've been really happy with it so far.
I was going to say I've had great experiences with Triplewell. I'm not as familiar with the other dashboards, but yeah, listeners, great tool to check out. Don't quote me on this. I believe they do a freemium model unless they've changed it recently. And pricing does definitely go up as you start scaling revenue. Derek, feel free to cut me off if I'm incorrect in that, but I know it's been a couple months since I've looked at their pricing model.
Yeah, there's definitely different tiers that you can be on with them. Being on a higher tier does unlock more functionality and more tools, but yeah, it's even at the basic level, it's a helpful tool.
Definitely. Within that, I'm curious, is there a certain business stage that you would say you think it's a no-brainer investment to sign up for Triplewell or another first-party tool like it? What I mean by that is if there's an Etsy shop out there, let's say that's doing $50K a year in annual revenue, that's phenomenal, but you probably shouldn't be spending a crazy amount of money on analytics tools. It's probably better to put that money directly into Google ads, directly into Meta ads, whatever it may be, grow the business a little more and then reassess from there. I'm curious, how would you go about approaching that one?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a hard and fast answer to that, to be honest. I do think that some of it will depend on your margins, and a lot of it will also depend on how dependent you are on some of these platforms like Meta or Google. If you're very dependent on Meta and Google for all of your revenue, it's worth looking at Triplewell because it can give you the real data to use these tools, these advertising platforms that you're using for everything, right? If you're making $1 million, a couple $1 million a year, I think that Triplewell is an easy thing to do. Like it's no brainer for sure. Less than that, it still might make sense, but it kind of depends on your focus, your margins, and really how you're bringing in sales as a business. Like I said, in my opinion, if most of your sales are coming from ads, you don't have a lot of organic sales or SEO going on, but they're all coming in from ads, it's worth investing at least a look at Triplewell or a similar tool, because that can be eye-opening. You might think that you have certain metrics going on for these ad platforms, but when you can unlock these different attribution models and the first-party tracking in and of itself, where it just sees the bigger picture, yeah, it can be eye-opening and it can really significantly impact your decisions.
I want to step back and pick your brain on marketing strategy. So how often do you and the team, let's say, rebuild your marketing strategy to a large degree? You know, is it something you do quarterly, something you do annually, or is it more so the type of thing where you say, hey, what we're doing is working really well. We're only going to change things if we see something change drastically in the industry? Struggling to get new customers? We're here to help. Hey, this is Pat.
the host of Customer Growth Sessions. Our agency, Intergrowth, has been helping e-commerce brands like Bella Bridesmaids, Brevity, and JS Dental to get more customers online since 2016. Interested in seeing how we'd help you? Head over to intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary consultation with me. That's intergrowth.com/CGS. All right, back to the show.
Typically, we don't really change our big strategy more than once a year. For example, we might say, hey, this year, as a big picture, we want to focus on, say it's growth. We really want to grow, increase the quantity of sales. That's going to shape everything we do each quarter and all of our targets, all of our initiatives, promotions, sales, etc. That being said, we do also have a quarterly check-in where we set new goals for the next 3 months. Those new goals should align with that big, broad, all-encompassing yearly goal. And I found that really helps us be pretty efficient in moving in the same direction. A lot of the times that I can help keep everyone on the team just working on the right thing. And then if we've hit those goals, we can adjust as needed, but typically we don't want to change the yearly goal. So say in quarter one, we fall behind. Say it's like, oh, we've set this revenue goal for the year. And so to get to that point, based off of historical data, we think we need to make this much of it in Q1. Well, what if we're off track by a lot in Q1? We don't change that yearly goal right away. Instead, we're like, all right, is there anything we can do to adjust our efforts or anything that we're doing to make up for that in Q2? Is it possible to get back on track in the following quarters? And we kind of make plans and set quarterly goals accordingly based on whether or not we're on or off track to our yearly goals. And we set yearly goals like, okay, revenue numbers. We set yearly goals for other major parts of our business. We have membership programs. So we set goals around that. We just set these numbers that we want to hit and that we've used historical data to project. None of them are just guesses or wishes. They're all based off of calculations and percentages and what we think is possible and what our trajectories are currently looking like. And also trends. Say this month we're down. All right. We're going to expect to grow this percentage, but it's going to be lower than the month before, maybe because we know, say it's in March. Maybe March is a low month. All of that's going to be factored into these yearly goals, which is then broken down into the quarterly goals. So if the yearly goal is a certain amount of revenue, then the quarterly goal also has a revenue goal, but that revenue goal is just a chunk. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
When we get to the end of the year, we look back and make sure we analyze everything really, really well, do a lot of audits. We're actually doing audits quarterly of everything in the department, basically. And then we decide, all right, what's next? Do we need to set another growth goal? Are we going to actually focus more on profit instead of goal? Maybe instead of growth, maybe we want to just increase our profits by a certain percentage. We might not grow as much, but if we can increase profits, let's do that. And we'll have a reason why, of course, but
And I was going to say, one of the things I did want to ask you about is how you assign marketing budgets on an annual basis. But I can imagine that varies depending on like, what is that big annual goal you're going after, whether it's more market share, more profit, probably scaling up, scaling down, short-term, long-term growth channels based on that.
Yeah, actually budgets is a kind of a tricky question there. We used to operate off of the budget for marketing. Now we don't. There's not a budget. And let me tell you why. If we go back to attribution and we go back to finance and data and targets, that is what we focus on. So if you've done all of your data analysis and your calculations correctly, there's no need to cap yourself with a budget. And your finance team, your CEO, the founder, everybody should know that. And it should be proven. The financial analyst should be able to show the numbers where it makes sense to everyone. But, say, for example, we know that, hey, if I'm getting a return on ad spend for this specific product of 3, then we're making this much in profit, let alone break even. And so we can always scale that campaign that's advertising that product as long as we're hitting that target metric, right? And that's kind of how we operate on all fronts. We set targets that we know are profitable. And as long as we're hitting the target, we know we can scale, keep spending more until we're either not hitting those targets anymore or we're just break even. At that point, we don't spend more, we leave it there. And if things fluctuate, we do pull spend back every now and then if we fall too far below a target. But that's kind of how we operate, is based on our targets. Because that way we know we're profitable, this is sustainable, we know what's coming, and we know how all these numbers are working together. to sustain our business. And so it's a no-brainer. If you're bringing in profits and you're hitting your growth goals and you're hitting these targets that you set, then you're like, oh, well, no, turn off all the ad campaigns. We've spent our, whatever it is, 50 grand for the week or the month or whatever it is you're looking at. That doesn't make any sense, right? Everything was going so well. You were profitable. You were making profit for every dollar you put in. You're making like $5 back. Why would you shut that off? And so for that reason, there's not a budget, because budgets don't make sense when you have target metrics.
I love that perspective. Oh, Derek, this has been amazing. We could go a lot deeper in this, but one of the questions I would like to wrap up with is, you had brought this up in one of your previous responses, was the membership program or the loyalty program that you have. I love the way that you guys have structured this. Can you tell us a little about your loyalty program?
The Live Ultralight membership is basically a savings account for outdoor gear. The way it works is you put in, if you're on the basic tier of the membership, you put in $10 a month. We hand it right back to you immediately as store credit that you can use whenever you want. So it's essentially free, but being a member unlocks a ton of just amazing benefits. Being a member gives you year-round discounts on any order, anytime. If it's during a sale, you just get a bigger discount than anyone else because you're a member. You get better shipping options. You get exclusive access to a lot of products. There's some members only items that we sell on our store that are locked only to our subscribed members. And there's locked access to this really awesome close Facebook group where everybody is kind of like feeding off each other, giving each other hiking ideas, encouragement if they're training for a big hike, whatever it is. There's a lot of people that are just kind of finding friends from all over the world, honestly, that are interacting with one another and just hanging out with their people in this close Facebook group, and our team as well. We're getting in there, we're answering questions, we're giving them any insights they need from us. And so you have all these benefits, this cool community, and this savings account for gear at essentially no cost. Like I said, the $10 you put in every single month as part of the subscription is getting handed right back to you immediately as store credit, which you can spend immediately as well, or save it up. So for me, sometimes I'm a member, I'm a paying member, even though I work at the company. I pay to be a member because the benefits are that good, even for me. It's really nice to just say, all right, well, if I have $10 going in here every single month and I do nothing, after a year, there's $120 that I can use towards gear and not bat an eye at it, because I never miss the $10 in any given month. That's not going to make or break me being able to pay my bills or anything. But at the end of the year, oh, well, if I want a new jacket, $120 is already there, and it didn't even cost me any effort hardly. And some of that is interesting to think about too, because, say you're like, well, I already have a jacket, I already have a backpack, a sleeping bag, whatever. I don't need more gear. It's still worth being a member, because what we've also built into this membership program is we are stocking gear from other brands that we don't design, we don't make, that we've tested, we believe in, we can promise works really well. And we've made it available to members, and members can use their discounts on those items as well. So one of those items is backpacker food. You've got those freeze-dried bags you always take, save some weight, just add water. Well, there's a ton of different brands that we've tested. We like, they taste good. They're not just like that nasty, the cheap stuff. But even if you have all the gear you need, if you're backpacking, you're going to need food. Like you're always going to need food. And you can get some of the best prices on the internet by just being a member. And those types of retail items that are non-Outdoor Vitals items, those are locked for only members can access those. And essentially, we've just built that in there as kind of a one-stop shop for backpacking for our members. So even if you have your gear, you can get really great prices on backpacker meals, hydration mixes. Hey, you need to replace your stove or whatever. You can do that through the membership with discounts and use your store credit on it.
Man, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And along those lines, I would imagine, my assumption, and maybe I'm totally off base, is that Outdoor Vitals isn't super profitable on the membership program, but that it works wonders in terms of building a great community and driving ultimately repeat purchases. Am I correct with that assumption?
Yes and no. So there's not really any profit when we take a member's subscription fee and hand it right back to them. Obviously, it's just like a zero transaction, right? There's just nothing. However, what that does is that gives us cash up front. So we want to fund like an order of some new jackets from our manufacturing partners. Cash is always there because we have all of those subscriptions rolling in every single month. So it's a win for us. But then on the back end of that, we found that our members have become such huge fans of Outdoor Vitals that they make up for 60% of all of our income. All of our revenue comes from those members. So it is very profitable for us to take care of these members and make sure that they have what they need and have a good experience, because they are the spenders. And that's, I think, makes sense. You take care of customers, give them a good experience. They have reason to come back. They have reason to be interested in what you're offering them.
Derek, this has been so insightful today. Last question. Let's start out with Outdoor Vitals. Where can listeners go to buy from Outdoor Vitals, follow you guys on social, share some of the links with us?
Yeah, so we're on YouTube. We actually have a couple of channels. Tayson Whitaker, he's our CEO and founder. His channel is called Tayson Whitaker. You can see a whole lot about the history of Outdoor Vitals, a lot of our hiking adventures. We're always creating videos around there. So go look that up. Tayson Whitaker is the channel name. Outdoor Vitals is our channel. We dig really deep into a lot of our gear, our designs, behind the design, what it takes to develop some of our gear. And then we have a podcast, which we also have a YouTube channel for that as well. So the podcast is called the Live Ultralight Podcast. We're on every major podcast platform. And if you prefer to watch those or listen to those podcasts on YouTube, just look up the Live Ultralight Podcast and you'll find us there too. So yeah, search Outdoor Vitals on all social media platforms. You'll find us. But I highly recommend checking out the YouTube channels and the podcast.
And listeners, we'll share links to all those different YouTube channels, websites, social links, you name it. Derek, what about you? Where can listeners go to learn more about your best insights?
That's a good question. I actually tend to stay off of social media as much as possible. Part of why I love working at Outdoor Vitals is the reason we exist as a company, right? The purpose of Outdoor Vitals is to help people connect to the outdoors. All of us here believe strongly that today's world is too plugged in. A lot of us are always on our phone, a TV screen, a laptop, whatever it is. But I firmly believe that if you spend more time disconnected and more time outside, it'll improve your well-being physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. And so, yeah, that's kind of my recommendation. Rather than look up more stuff on your laptop or your phone, just turn it off, go outside and spend some time enjoying the sunshine. And I think you're just going to have a much better day than trying to listen to anything else I have to say, to be honest.
Well, there it is, listeners. If you want to talk to Derek, if you want to hear his insights, you have to go find him on the trails of Utah.
Pretty much.
Derek, this has been awesome. Thank you for coming on today. Once again, listeners, this is Derek Rasmussen, the marketing director over at Outdoor Vitals. Derek, thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. It's been fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.